How was that for a transition?
Hey, everybody.
Hey, welcome to our weekly live stream. We're the animators. We have the third member of our team making an appearance this week. So we'll see how long it lasts.
Yes.
We'll see how long it lasts. She's cooperating now.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for being understanding about my constant state of motion during the live stream today. So hopefully I'll get to lay her down at some point and actually 100% focus on the stream today. But wonders of being a family group.
That's true. This is a family. This is a family channel, in every sense of the word. No, we're really excited for this week's stream. Every week I feel like we say we had a big week because something major happens in Lorcana.
I feel like this week it warrants it.
I think this week it does warrant it. We had some awesome news. Not only is the first set out, and we're seeing tournaments, competitive play every single week. People are getting more product. But we saw our first spoilers for set 2.
Yeah, super exciting.
Which is crazy. And a very cool product that we're going to talk about for the first half of the show. We have some wonderful guests joining us. And then for the second half of the show, we're going to bring on another great guest to talk about the tournament rules that Ravensburger officially released and how we see those playing out, as well as some thoughts on the tournaments we've seen so far. So first half of the show about art and design, second half of the show about competitive play. So we're super excited. We have some fun stuff. So really excited to welcome our co-host for this week. A couple of people who we've wanted to have on the show for a while. This is Becky and Katie. They run a fantastic podcast called Live Laugh Lorcana. We love it so much. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us. This is so exciting.
More women in Lorcana. I love it.
Yes.
It's exciting for us too. While I asked you how all of your week was and what you thought of the news, I'm gonna find your podcast so I can advertise it a bit. But how was your week?
It was awesome. Yeah, like all the spoilers have been so exciting. And then personally, we both opened our first Enchanteds in the last week. So it's been a great week for us.
Very good week.
So jealous. We still have not opened an Enchanted.
Which ones were they?
I got a Maui.
And I got the Aurora.
Oh,
amazing.
So amazing.
I do love the Aurora is one I feel like we should have our next guest, we're going to talk about the Disney 100 cards in a minute, but we should have our next guest back to talk about that Aurora, because I do feel like that art on that Enchanted card is such a throwback to the art of the original movie.
It is gorgeous.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Who opened the first one?
I did.
Yeah.
Nice.
We have yet to open our own Enchanted.
Yes. One day.
I do have on the screen, everybody, Live Laugh Lorcana's podcast. Fantastic episodes. Definitely go check it out. Subscribe. It's one of the best you'll find in terms of making Lorcana approachable for everybody, families, etc. So we love it so much.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Your mouse is over there.
I know. We're professionals. All right. So, and I do, before we bring our first guest on, I have one more fun thing I want to show. I've been wanting to highlight this for a few weeks. And as a fun little Easter egg, I want to show these people because for those who haven't been around, TCGs before, or maybe not deep into them, doing custom painted cards, like modified cards, is a thing that a lot of people, or that some artists do, and people pay big money, several $100s for like custom cards. And this Stitch one is a perfect example, which took a Stitch from the game and an artist painted over it. I've highlighted the artist over on the left. And people use these to play with, and sometimes in some companies they're legal, some they're not. It's up to the judge, but we just think they're really cool and wanted to show people.
Now, I will say that in things like Magic the Gathering, the original artists will sometimes do this alt art. I think with the current contracts with Disney and Ravensburger, the original artists aren't going to be able to do this alt art on their cards. But fan art is definitely permissible. And I have to say, like, once again, I feel like we always shout them out, but like, shout out to the Mufasa in the middle and the original art by Luis Herta. And I love how they even the clouds in the sky are even a part of the alt art. So it's really gorgeous how that all blended together. And definitely check out these on social media so you can get them nice and zoomed in, because the brush strokes and everything like that are really beautiful. This person did a great job.
Yeah. Anyway, we thought they're cool.
Yeah.
They're amazing.
Cool art. Yay.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, let's bring in our first guest here, or our first actual guest and not co-host. So we all saw the Disney 100 cards released this week, and it took me I don't know about you all, it took me a minute to realize that those were actual Disney animators who did those.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Liam was like looking, I think because the news dropped at like 5 in the morning or something like that. And
Yeah.
we were up feeding while Liam was looking at the art, and he was like, what are these signatures? And he couldn't quite figure it out. And it took us a little bit to figure out that those were the original, or that those were actual Disney artists who created those pieces. So
yeah. So they're really cool. It really shows that Disney's leaning into these to the game by having some of their animators do these alt art cards. We'll show them here in a second, but when we saw them, we knew we needed to find somebody who is an expert, or at least an expert hobbyist in these animators in Disney animation, to talk about why these artists were picked for these cards and why they're so important. So we're really excited to have on Amber, the creator, the writer, the owner of the Discographies YouTube channel. And I'll bring that up here in a second so you all can see. Amber's channel focuses on the background of various Disney animators, artists, the people behind the scenes who bring animation to life. Each one of her videos is incredibly well researched. We love it so much. And so, Amber, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, it's nice to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, let me find my cursor.
So Amber, I have to ask, how did you get into Discography? Like, what is your background with your channel? When did you start doing it, and what drove you to want to teach people about the creators behind all of our favorite Disney movies?
That's a really good question. I originally wanted to just learn more. Like I'm a huge trivia nerd. Like I love Disney trivia and all that stuff. And I was doing a trivia thing where they asked the 101 Dalmatian question, which is my favorite movie. I know everything about it, except that the guy who does Jasper also did some other voice, and I still don't know. I'm getting there. But oh my gosh, I was so upset. So I'm like, okay, now I'm going to go and just learn all I can about all the animators and all the voice artists and everything. And I went on YouTube and tried to find it, and it wasn't there. And I'm like, okay, well, that needs to exist. I need to make that happen. So I went to school for editing, and I had been looking for something to kind of put my creativity into. So I called a friend who I knew was good at voice art, like voiceovers and stuff. And we kind of put it together, and then I have another person come in and write some corny jokes and stuff. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. I'm really, really enjoying it.
Well, we
That's
can't wait to
awesome.
get your take on these cards, because I think they're right up your wheelhouse, and we're gonna get right into it. Yeah, these are the cards. Amber, what? So
I think let's like really quickly lay the groundwork. So
Yeah, I'm sorry.
as many
Go ahead.
people know, Disney is celebrating their 100th anniversary this year. They've been doing it up big. There's been celebrations at the parks. And just, I mean, if you go on to Disney Plus on your, on your smart TV or whatever, like Disney 100 is everywhere. So it is super exciting to see that Disney is kind of blessing Lorcana in a way that they have partnered with Lorcana or with Ravensburger in this way by producing these commemorative cards in honor of their anniversary. So these were released as a part of the sneak peek of the second chapter, and will be coming out later this year.
yeah,
For those
December
people who-
1st, I think.
Yeah. So sorry, just wanted to like lay the groundwork if people missed the news this week.
That's a good idea. So I'm really excited to get Amber's take on some of these. Amber, I'm going to let you take it away in a second here, but I just, we got these cards, we sent them to you, you saw them for the first time, you started reading the names. What did you think?
Oh my gosh. These are beautiful. Oh my gosh. So the first one that drew my eye was the Mickey Mouse. And it took me forever. I didn't know that at the bottom it says the artist. So it took me forever to like read that name. Like, what does that say? But when I found out it was Mark Henn, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's beautiful. And it really does. I think we were talking about the other day about why they chose Mickey Mouse for Mark Henn, because Mark Henn has done pretty much every Disney princess that you can think of. He did Ariel, he did Belle. For both of those, he co-directed or supervised them. And then he did Jasmine all by himself, Pocahontas, Mulan. He's done all of them. Young Simba was another one. And yet he picked Mickey Mouse. And I also wonder if they gave him the choice of what he was going to draw.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
We're going to have to find that out.
Because if they did give him a choice and they picked Mickey, I think it makes a lot of sense for his like personality. Because he really is a company man. He's very proud to work for Disney. When there were a lot of layoffs and stuff in the early 2000s, late 2000s, and when they went to start laying people off, he was terrified. Whereas a lot of the other animators were like, I'll go wherever. But he was like, no, I need to stay with Disney. Disney was my goal, and Disney's where I'm going to stay. So I think if he chose Mickey, that might be why.
So Amber, it sounds like from what you're saying, he successfully made the transition from 2D to 3D animation when Disney kind of made that switch in the 2000s. Is he still, did he survive that kind of shift into digital art?
Kind of. He did train for about a year, I think. Trying to get a hold of the 3D thing. And him, like a lot of other like amazing animators, just either weren't interested. They're like, yeah, okay, this is great, but it's not what I like, so I'm not gonna do it. Or they just couldn't get a hang of it, and that was Mark. He just didn't like it. It wasn't near what he liked about drawing. So he was, I think, on the chopping block to leave. But they kept him and Eric Goldberg, which we'll talk about soon, I'm sure. And I think some other people, but I'm not exactly sure who. But they've kept them to like supervise and give advice throughout all of the new features. So they'll sit down and look at somebody's animation in 3D, like on Frozen, and he'll be like, okay, this is good, but here's my suggestions on how to make it like better poses and better expression and all that stuff, how to make it read better. So he's not like any authority figure anymore, but he is a big like a behind the scenes teacher for all of the new blood, I guess.
A mentor.
Yes, a mentor. Yes.
Becky, Katie, where does this card, out of the 6 cards, where does Mickey Mouse rank for you in terms of, is it your favorite or?
Honestly, until I heard Amber right now, it was kind of on my lower end. I didn't see anything too spectacular with it, like because some of the art like just really sticks with me. But hearing the history and like how Mark is such a Disney guy, like that just makes me so happy. And if he did choose to do this Mickey here, I just think that's so beautiful, and I'm just so happy for him.
So sweet. I agree. He's a very, very sweet guy. Like if you watch all his interviews and stuff, he's a teddy bear. Like he he just
Aw.
loves doing what he does. It's so cute.
Sounds like he like kind of personifies Mickey in a way.
Oh
Mhm.
yeah.
Being such a Disney person and being just like this glowing light, you know, of the Disney brand. That's awesome.
That's so great.
Mhm.
Gosh, we have. I have a feeling that we could talk about any one of these animators all day long,
Absolutely.
and we can come back.
Yeah, I was about to say we have 6 cards.
We have
gotta
6
get to.
cards. Like Becky, Katie, which one? You know, you said this wasn't necessarily at the top of your list, but you like the story. Which one is at the top of your list?
My absolute favorite is the Elsa Gloves Off. I love, 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 love the colors used and the composition. And I love seeing like that interpretation of like a 3D card as, you know, a 3D character as 2D. And and like my favorite with Brittany, because she designed, you know, Anna's like costuming and the hair and everything. And it's just, those are like my favorite parts. It is just, I just love this card. I think it's fabulous.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So Amber, I know your specialty is more in the history and some of the classic Disney animators. Do you know much about Brittany and her work with the company?
I don't. I looked her up a little bit before this because I knew we might be talking about her, and I think, yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, I don't know much. I know that she was a visual artist on the Frozen film, and she also, I think, worked on Moana a lot. And just like a what's the word? Concept artist, like a concept artist. So I don't know if it's almost like they're from the little research I did. It's almost like they're saying that she did design Elsa and Anna, but I can't confirm that. But her artwork is just beautiful, like everything about it. I also know that she is known for doing, and I don't know what it's actually called, but it's where you do like paper art. Where you like have a background and then you have paper in front of it. And she's well known for making that type of artwork, which this kind of reminds me of.
I think you're right. As I was looking her up, I think you're right. You know, most of these artists nowadays who operate, you know, just in the digital medium are purely digital. Although most of them still pencil sketch and they're trained in traditional media. Brittany, I think, still advertises herself as a traditional and digital artist because I think she still does like the paper cutouts in physical form, and then she also does the same thing in digital. And so it's interesting. But I think you see like that kind of influence here in this piece. And I wish I could zoom in on this card specifically, but it does look like the paper cutouts layered. And it's just really cool. And I think it also looks like it has that Nordic kind of style that Frozen is inspired by.
I was
It's
going
just
to
a
say,
beautiful
it
piece.
definitely looks, you know, some of these cards, you'll see it with Maui as well. I think a little bit with Stitch. They almost look like concept art pieces from the movie. Like if you watch the behind the scenes of a lot of these films, I feel like the style of the concept art you'll often see is very similar to this.
Yeah. Absolutely stunning.
So Becky, was it you who said this was your favorite?
Yes.
Okay, so what drew you to this piece initially when you saw it?
Again, with like the kind of Nordic feels, like the use of color is just so pretty in this. And I love the kind of like the darker and then the white at the forefront. I just think is so lovely. And just the pose, and it just feels nice. It just has such the feeling of Elsa. And even if you didn't know who Elsa was, but you just saw this, like you totally get who she is as a character, you know, like the power and the connection with nature and just all of this. And it's just, I just love it. It makes me so happy.
I agree. One thing I do want to highlight too, and I forgot about this until I was looking at the Mickey card. Like they're not quite full art, but they're pretty close. And if you look carefully at the text box, I don't want people to miss that you can see the rest of the art piece down below. And so like on Mickey, you can see his feet down below, and you miss that full body piece if you're not paying attention. So it's really cool.
That's so cool.
But yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's cool.
Amber, I know there are other artists that you're dying to talk
I
about.
was about to say we got to get to Katie's favorite piece.
That's true. Actually, that's a good point.
Yeah. Katie, what's your
Amber, you had
favorite
your chance.
piece?
My favorite is the Stitch. Kind of like what Becky's saying. I feel like you can look at that Stitch card and know exactly who Stitch is. Like it really captures Stitch's essence and like the sense of like mischief and movement. Like I really love this one.
So Amber, what do you know about Alex?
Unfortunately, not as much as I would like to. Okay. So around the night after Aladdin, where they had done Little Mermaid and then Beauty and the Beast, and then they did Aladdin, and then the execs said, "Hey, we're going to put out like double the amount of movies," and the animators were like, "Are we? I don't think that's a great idea." So they're like, here, let's do this. Let's split you guys in half. We'll have half of you guys work in Florida. And that's when they were making the MGM studios. Where if you went, you could see all the animators working behind the scene at the theme park. So they moved half of them there, quote unquote. And then they kept the other half, and everyone decided was able to choose which movie they were going to work on, either Pocahontas or The Lion King. So it was a little bit before this that all that happened. But Mark Henn ended up going Lion King. Deja ended up going Lion King. But they built this studio before that, and basically most people went towards Pocahontas, and then a couple people went towards Lion King. And so they ended up hiring like a whole bunch of like new artists for Lion King and all of that stuff. And he was one of them. So I'm trying to think, let me bring up his thing, because
I know he was, I mean, obviously, as the card suggests, very much involved in the development of Stitch as a character and that movie.
It's interesting too to think about, like in hindsight, Amber, kind of what you were talking about, the split of the studio and people leaning more towards Pocahontas, because I think nowadays when you think of a more iconic Disney movie, you're probably going to think of Lion King. Like having an opportunity to work with Elton John on a movie, like come on.
Yes.
What about Mel Gibson though, right?
I mean, yeah. Okay. Touche.
That's true.
Touche.
It's fair. It was very part of the time. If I remember right, they didn't think Lion King was going to do as well as it did. Didn't they think that was going to be the B movie out of the two?
Yeah, it was called King of the Jungle, and it wasn't as like thought out at the time, so it wasn't as far into the process. Whereas Pocahontas was pretty far in, and they knew what story they were going to tell and everything. So that's why they kind of pulled that, because they were also coming straight off of Beauty and the Beast and the Best Picture thing. And so I think they all had that like Best Picture stars in their eyes. They're like, we're going to make a great movie, and we're going to get so many more accolades for it. And then there's the B team going, hey, I like lions. This is cool. Let's draw lions.
I want a company paid trip to Africa.
Yeah, exactly.
Who's into that? Katie, what do you like about this? Like, why did you go here as your favorite?
Just how lively the character is for me. Like it just jumped out at me right away, and I really love it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love the color in this piece. It's so bright and vibrant.
Yeah, it is interesting. I do like the idea that I like to think, as you suggested, Amber, that some of these artists were asked who they wanted to draw. And so you're really seeing these artists, like especially in Alex's case, who helped invent Stitch in terms of his look and concept. The idea that he now gets to create like his iconic version of the character, like draw him any way you want.
Yeah.
Go. And he creates this, as somebody in the chat said, this friendlier version of Stitch the Abomination is just really cool.
I wonder too if they were like, you could do Stitch Abomination, Stitch Surfer, Stitch New Dog. Like, if I wonder if they had an opportunity to pick which version of Stitch they wanted to reimagine, or if, you know, Disney / Ravensburger, I don't know who's leading this effort, was like, you're doing Stitch Abomination.
Yeah,
but I love that they selected this version of Stitch.
Yeah,
that's so cool. Yeah,
I have to note one more thing on this. Did they give him new flavor text for this card? I think they may have. I have to double check. Somebody call me out in the chat if the full art version got new flavor text. Anyway, super cool. You know, I don't want to give Alex short shrift here, but we I know there's others we have to talk about. Amber, I know there's somebody that you were dying to talk about out of these cards. Do you want to move on to another one?
Sure.
Who should we talk about next?
Let's see. Let's do Eric Goldberg.
I knew you want to talk about Eric. We do need to talk about Eric.
Yes. Oh, he is amazing. He is. He was trained under Richard William and Ken Harris. Richard William did Roger Rabbit. He did like Raggedy Ann and Andy. He did so many there's so much to say about him in general, but I digress. He, when he was making one of his films, he brought in a whole bunch of like old Warner Brothers animators together, as well as Art Babbitt from Disney and Grim Natwick from Disney and Betty Boop fame. Just all of these like masters together, and then Eric got hired to work along with all of them. So he literally, like, he was self-trained, so he taught himself how to animate, and then he ended up here just among like giants and learned from them. So he's interesting because he comes from all of this Warner Brothers like style, and then he gets brought into Aladdin. Like, he didn't work on any other Disney movies like the rest of them. He didn't even go to Cal Arts like the rest of them. He just gets brought straight into Aladdin. They give him the script. He's the first animator on that movie. They give him the scripts and like, hey, what do you think? And he's like, yeah, that's great. And they're like, do you want to do Genie? And he's like, yes, I want to do Genie. And yeah, he basically set the style for that whole movie. And you definitely see like that Warner Brothers like pizzazz feeling here. I absolutely love it. Al Hirschfeld, I don't know if you guys have heard of him. I didn't before I started researching Eric, but he is very, very influenced by him, and that whole movie is like, he's a New York newspaper artist, and he has all of these lines, like very nice and curved lines and stuff. Very Al Hirschberg, I think that's his name.
Now that you mentioned that, Amber, you can definitely, like, you think about Aladdin, and I can definitely see kind of the newspaper cartoon aspect of Genie specifically. But just the whole film. That's interesting to think about that.
Yeah,
that inspiration.
And bringing the two together, didn't Mark Henn work on Aladdin as well? Isn't he responsible for Jasmine?
Yeah, he did Jasmine. Yeah. So cool.
It's really cool. You know, Eric Goldberg. So I know when people saw him, they were very excited, and I had in my head that he was, you know, like Mark Henn had been there for ages. But it's interesting that he came over for Aladdin with that history in Warner Brothers. I don't know. That's cool. Yeah. That's fascinating.
It's my favorite.
Yeah.
I also think it's interesting, like thinking back to Lorcana and these cards, what cards have now gotten, you know, Chapter 1 and Enchanted and a Disney D100.
This is the only one.
Yeah.
It's the only one. Which is interesting. I think it almost lends credence to the idea that the artist got to choose which card to work on, because right? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Well, I was thinking, just like, because Aladdin, of course, is like a huge movie, but I feel like the genie just encompasses like so much of Disney animation. Like he's such like in Aladdin, he's just like, say Aladdin is like the heart of the movie, like the genie is the soul, and he just adds so much to it, and kind of, I don't want to say slapstick, but like almost adds just like so much to it. And even in this card, I love the little details with like in the magic, the little whimsical stuff. And I Genie is just like, from Robin Williams voicing it and how they took that and made it into him. He's just amazing. Like Eric Goldberg is like a rock star. Like it's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, he's totally a rock star having to like deal with Robin Williams going.
Right. Like, what do I do with this?
Actually, with that, there was a whole part of the interviews I watched where he was talking about how it was written in the script. He's gonna talk this way, and like an announcer and like a pirate or whatever, and then but he's him, Robin Williams, so he just goes off the rails, and they bring home all of this gold, and they're like, we have to use this. We have to use all of this. Like, we can't just stick to the script. We have to use his improvs. Anyway.
Speaking of rock stars, I do have one more guest I want to bring in here for a few minutes to comment for a second on Eric Goldberg, because he did a whole video, like thumbnail. It was a whole big thing.
Did you just say, speaking of rock stars, and then bring me in?
You know that I am the king of segues.
Nerdiest rock star you've ever met. How
and
are
I look for segues where I can find them, and I found one here.
Amazing.
I did mention the video. Also, another thing I'm known for is finding awkward thumbnails.
Let's go.
So,
oh yeah, I am
Jonty
super
did
happy
do-
about that D100 set. Look at that.
He's so excited. No, I wanted to highlight it because you did some great work, like right away. Like,
You can stop showing Jonty in a really awkward position.
oh, sorry.
by
Okay,
the
I'll
way.
take him off. I'll bring it back here for a minute. I did want to bring it in because I think, Jonty, out of all the creators and people paying attention, you were like the first one to go, oh my goodness, this is what these cards are, and you immediately highlighted it. I know you're a big Disney buff.
So fast. Oh my god.
Yeah, well, I mean, timing wise, it just so happened that I happened to have the day off work, so that was the only reason it got out so quick. But yeah, I'll be honest with you, the thing that I saw a few tweets about the set that was like, oh yeah, it looks okay, it's it's more enchanted, it's whatever. But at this point, I was like, yeah, but look at the names, right? And for those who don't know, I work at a TCG store. I play card games a lot, but I came into Lorcana 100% as a Disney fan. Like, first and foremost, the fact that it's a trading card game is even better. But yeah, these are all names that, well, some names that I've grew up with, and some, much like Amber, sort of had to do a little bit of reading up on some of the newer ones. But yeah, the main thing that made me sit up and make that video was my boss at the store. I showed them him, and he saw the genie Powers Unleashed, and he went, yeah, it's nice. He said, but like, I feel like I've seen that genie art 4 times in this game already. And I was like, yeah, because the other 3 people are copying this guy. Like, that's why, because this is Eric Goldberg is the reason the genie looks this way. That's why the others look like that. So yeah, that was what sort of really prompted me to get home and start reading up on them all and putting something out. Not even close to the quality of the discographies, by the way. I am a fan, Amber. I'll be honest with you, I'm not so much of a fan because I was expecting a guy today, because I heard earlier that you have a friend who voices it for you, but you're the brains behind the operation. I understand that now. But yes, I'm a big fan of the stuff that you do. And a couple of things that were mentioned before, just because it'll annoy me if I don't get it out there. Brittany Lee did a lot of the costuming and hairstyling for Frozen. The characters were actually by Chris Buck, who I'm sure you know. Chris Buck was who came up with sort of the look of the overall look of Anna and Elsa. But yeah, her stuff is awesome. I love that papercraft style. But yeah, the top one for me has to be the genie, just because Eric Goldberg is just a legend, an absolute living legend. The fact that he's still doing stuff today, both him and Mark, like the fact that they've been able to stay at Disney despite not being able to shift into 3D. I know this is something you spoke about before as well. But to be honest with you, I think that a lot of the 3D movies are enriched by the 2D animation that is still happening with them, even if it is just some of the title sequences that Mark does a lot of. But Eric was the sort of lead on Maui's tattoos. You know, the little mini Maui that runs all around. So he's still there, you know, doing core 2D animation work in modern Disney movies, and I think that's amazing. That, like, I don't think it should ever be thought that Disney are just keeping these guys around as a thank you. Like, they're keeping them there because they're still doing incredible work in the movies, which I think is awesome. Yeah, I hope I get my hands on one of these sets, man. They're going to be so rare.
Yep. Yeah, I hope they're printed to oblivion. Did you want to transition?
Oh yeah, I was going to say, speaking of Maui, speaking of segues,
boom.
So Amber, John, like, everyone, what are our thoughts on the Maui D100 card?
This is one of the ones, actually, with the pictures. There is one picture of his that I do want to show if you do have time.
Yeah.
But I was looking at his art. I don't know much about him, but I was looking at his art, and it looks very cartoony. Like, if you look at his art outside of Disney, very, I don't know, like I think he designed some things for what is it? I can't remember. But he's like his work is very cartoony, and then you bring in the Disney style that's very, like, toned down. So I think it's really cool that they gave him Maui, which is kind of like a trickster, and then they gave him this, like, he chose probably this yeah, there we go. Kind of like Courage the Cowardly
It's Nickelodeon-y, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's not.
yeah.
It doesn't have that grounded quality that Disney does, right?
Exactly. So a lot of his work is like that. Like that's one of the more extreme ones I found. But I think it's interesting that he kind of draws in that really fun way, and then he chooses this really fun pose, and they give him, or he chose, I'm not sure, Maui, who is like the embodiment of I kind of a fun. Yeah.
It does highlight too, you know, I think exactly your point, Jonty, about the influence of the 2D artists on 3D. You know, Bill, you know, looking up his stuff, he did a lot of the concept work for Moana. Not only Maui, but, you know, here we see a version of Moana and a lot of the other stuff. And all the 3D animators are working off 2D concept art.
Yeah, it goes without saying, right? Like, they all still start 2D. All of these movies, they all still start on 2D. Like, it's all still storyboarded. It's all still concept arted. You know, it's none of this goes to 3D until, you know, a lot of the core lines are put into place, and the 3D artists are replicating it and then moving forward with it. Yeah. So Bill's a tricky one. There's not much about him. I find there's a big dichotomy in Disney artists. There are the heroes, the sort of, like you say, the rock stars, the legends, and you can find Wikipedia pages on them and all sorts. But the ones who are there now and actively working, it's actually kind of tricky to find a lot about what they're up to. I mean, that, for instance, the picture we have there of Bill, that's an old picture, but it's almost the most current one you can find of the guy. Like, he is white hair now. But yeah, so it was a little tricky to do. To pull up stuff. The only thing I could find with Bill is that he's done a lot of stuff on Wish, which is the new Disney movie coming later this year, which looks very exciting. But but again, obviously, a lot of that is all sort of tied up in NDAs and secrets until it's out there, right? But yeah, it's some really exciting stuff.
Really excited for that film, by the way. May we see it in Lorcana. I do, you know, we do have another segment to move on to in a second here, but we have one more artist to hit. Speaking of contemporary artists.
Very nice segue.
Yeah. No, and the one thing I'll say right up front, I mean, this is one of my favorite pieces, and I'm sure it ranks, I'm guessing, you know, that for Becky, this also ranks up there because it's very similar in style to the Elsa art. But Lorelei is a you know, a company artist, and you can see off on the right, she did for example, just some of her pieces for Disney, this whole series of classic, I think they're albums. I think they're actually like vinyl.
They are. They're vinyl records. Yeah,
Yeah.
these are. Yeah.
And you can see her style throughout, and it's really cool. So she's definitely a company artist who works for them in a whole variety of areas, not just in animation.
Yeah, she does a lot of the little golden books that until I read that, didn't realize were still being made. I had hundreds of those as a kid, but yeah, they're still out there with getting new ones out, which is amazing.
Yeah, fascinating. Amber, were you able to find, again, I know your specialties in more of the older, like, contemporary artists, but any
Information
on Lorelei you found?
Okay. First of all, this is my favorite card. I love her dress. I love her pose. I love everything about her, and it doesn't hurt that Maleficent's definitely up there and one of my favorite characters. So about Lorelei, what the biggest thing I found about her was that people compare her to Mary Blair a lot. Like, her artwork is very Mary Blair-ish, which I think is fascinating. That's so cool. And then when I learned that, I looked up, maybe Mary Blair worked on Sleeping Beauty, but she didn't. Like, that's one of the ones that she didn't work on. And so maybe this is like, if Mary Blair had worked on Sleeping Beauty, this is what would have come out of it.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's really cool. I do think, this style, and Lorelei's style, it is very similar to the original film. And so getting her to do this piece is so good.
Yeah. So well done. Mm-hmm. Definitely brought a lot to Mark Davis, who was the original animator and designer. Definitely kept what he brought to it there.
Yeah, one thing I said in my video was that Lorelei is the only artist that, as far as I can tell, hasn't already worked with this character in some form. All of the others, it's either one they've worked on or whatever. But again, as you said, Mark Davis passed away 20 years ago now, I think. So, obviously anything from the Nine Old Men era you're not going to get an artist, unfortunately, who worked on them originally. So I think, like you say, she's done him proud here. One thing even though the style is very different, the medium is very different, Maleficent has one of the greatest silhouettes in all of animation, and she's absolutely captured that. You could completely throw this into Photoshop and grayscale it and took the contrast 1,000% up, so it's just black and white, and you'd still know exactly who he was. And I think there's something to be said about that. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I think so too. There's barely any background. It is just her, and this is another piece too that benefits from kind of like looking out and realizing you have the full silhouette in the text box as well.
Mm-hmm. The dress that goes down.
Look at that dress.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
That's so cool.
Well, also in this original Sleeping Beauty, I recall the very interesting art style, but the backgrounds were just very busy, and they were inspired by tapestries and all this kind of stuff. And I think it's kind of amazing on this card that it is Maleficent, and there is
strip right back.
Nothing around her. It's just her, and the face she is making is so good. I just love it. It's so good.
And to be fair, shout out to Diablo by her side. He's still he's still there rocking out.
Oh, Diablo, and he will be a card one day. I hope. Hey, I just have to say we're gonna have to move on to our next segment, but this was so much fun. Jonty, thanks for joining us. For a few minutes here to give your thoughts. Everybody, go watch his video.
Yeah, if you want a very condensed history of the people in this set, go and watch my video. And if you want someone that's actually researched properly and knows what they're talking about, go and watch discographies.
That is true. And
I will be checking out your video after this. Definitely.
It's very abridged.
And Amber, thanks so much for joining us and providing your thoughts. And if you're looking for new people and animators to work on, you now have an entire Lorcana audience who's waiting for videos on a couple of these artists.
Oh, yes. absolutely. That the Stitch guy is 100% being lifted up to the top of my list. Is
Nice.
Awesome.
didn't know he existed. Well, I knew he probably existed, but I'm so ready to learn more about him. Yay.
Well, that's awesome. Well, when you get the video done, send Jonty, Katie, Becky, and us a note, and we'll all link to it and share it. And just, yeah.
Absolutely,
But thanks so much for joining us.
No problem.
Thank you both. Have a great night.
Yeah.
Man, that was fun.
That was a marathon.
That's
sprint.
awesome.
But before we move on to talk about tournament play, what are your thoughts? That was fun.
This is embarrassing, but
Yeah.
I'm a fangirling a little bit that I got to meet Jonty. Is that embarrassing to say?
It is not. It is not.
And Amber,
Is it Jonty? Is it embarrassing to say?
Not at all.
You know, it's
It's absolutely
embarrassing.
fine, honestly.
I'm here to embarrass
Totally fine.
her. Leon.
All right.
I've never been more red.
Jonty is one of the nicest people in the world.
He
And,
really seems it.
uh,
And Amber was incredible. I learned so much. She's a delight. I love
I
that.
know. I just wanted to be like, tell me more.
Yeah, right?
that's one of the unfortunate things about these hour-long videos, hour-ish long. I say as we're late for our next segment is, we could probably spend 40 minutes on Eric Goldberg by himself.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but man, it's Disney's fault for giving us 6 amazing cards.
I know. And that we had to move through in 1 week.
Yeah. So, gosh, I hope they're readily available.
Yeah,
All
now
right.
I'm stressed. I'm like, how do I get my hold of this?
Right.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be tough. I feel like right before Christmas too, like as like the second set's coming out and Lorcana continues to gain popularity, I think it's just gonna be tough to get a hold of all of them. So
I think so too. How to get the cards and then how to get the actual animators to sign them. That is gonna be fun.
okay, so moving on to gameplay.
Yeah, no, I do have to move on to. We're going to move on to tournament rules competition. I'm short shrifting Dan here again, as I do every time. I tell Dan, here's what happens every week. I tell Dan, can you come on the podcast? Be about 20, 25 minutes. We'll move in, and then the first segment always runs long, and I do this. So Dan, from Forbidden Mountain.
Hi, Dan.
Hi, everyone. I'm happy to join all this happiness. It's great.
Thanks for joining us. For those, just a quick introduction for those who don't know, Forbidden Mountain is a channel, a podcast. Dan and Scott host it. They focus heavily on competitive play, meta decks, deck techs. So if you're into the competitive scene of Lorcana, definitely check out Forbidden Mountain. Very plugged into PPG as well. So I know you're monitoring all of those events and those tournaments, which is why you're here to talk about tournaments, tournament rules, etc.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
thanks.
PPG is
Pro Play Games.
there. You go.
I
Thank
got
you,
you.
Dan. for those more casual players who are watching the show tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to pitch it over to Becky and Katie. The idea to talk about the tournament rules came from you all. And you're like, hey, this came out this week. I think there's some nuggets in there. And I think that's something we should talk about on the show.
Liam's playing with my lipstick.
I fidget with things off camera.
Yeah, I'm fidgety too.
I totally get that.
Yeah, now I have to find something else to fidget with. So do you have any, did you see anything in the tournament rules? Do you have any questions for Dan that you want to leave it off with, or just insights? I don't know.
I have a lot of questions. I played Flesh and Blood competitively. I've not played like Magic or anything. So when the rules came out, it seemed like the Magic people were mad about very different things than I was concerned about and stuff. So I just wanted to maybe ask what you thought about some of them. So a big one was note taking. We're a super casual podcast, but our Discord blew up about note taking. They were very concerned about the lack of note taking in the original rules. I'm used to it, but what do you think?
I think that was easily the biggest shock in a way. However, to my knowledge, from my conversations I've had with people, it's actually been a common thing in games now. A lot of the newer games don't allow for you to take notes. A lot of the games don't even allow you to keep score on Notepad anymore. So the fact that we're actually able to use a notepad to still keep score if you want was kind of a big deal. Personally, I think it's kind of a coin toss. Like, the competitive player in me wants all the information possible, so I would love to be able to take notes, etc. But I can also respect the idea that it takes time. You know, every time you see your opponent's hand, you want to write it all down, and that takes time. And in all honesty, if anyone's been following any of the streams, Liam had one on here the other day. We've done a couple with PBG. Like, games are taking long, and with games already taking so long, if you add note taking to it, it only makes them longer. So I think it might be a true conscious decision to try and keep that 50-minute round barrier, in all honesty.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You think it's a time thing more than a competitive advantage kind of deal?
It for what it's worth, it could be both. I just think now, like, with 3 weeks of like watching streams, watching events, watching games, like, you know, there's a lot of games going 40 minutes. There's a lot of games going 45 minutes. So, like, when you start looking at that and you go, well, if they were writing down every single piece, like every time your opponent inks, you would write that down. Like, at the highest competitive level, every single time your opponent literally inked a card, you would write that card down because you would utilize that information through the entire game. So that's just another step. It's another piece of thing. And it just adds and adds and adds and adds. So I think that I think it has to do with time, but I also think that they are trying to keep it into a more casual setting, and, you know, they're definitely trying to keep it away from, you know, whatever unfair advantage of one player taking notes against another and things like that. Rather than doing any of it, they just got rid of it.
That's fair.
So segue on the timing. The best of 3 in 50 minutes seems far-fetched with some of the decks we're seeing. Can you see them like either extending that time limit or even considering not a best of 3?
Personally, if you don't have a sideboard in a game, I'm totally fine with the best of 1. I think that a lot of games have been successful in a best of 1 format. There have been games in the past that do best of 1, and then to make up for the like best of 3, you actually do Swiss plus 2. So like a normal round would say it'll be 30-minute rounds instead of 50-minute rounds, but you would do 2 more rounds. So like your matches would end up, it would be the same time frame almost, in all honesty. Actually, most times it ends up being shorter, but you play 2 more rounds and then you kind of just get rid of the whole, oh, I lost the die roll, you know, all that. It just breaks like curves later on. Do I think that they will increase the time? Honestly, probably not. And here's why. Like, in all honesty, the moment they raise it to 55, people will 160. The moment you raise it to 60, they'll 165. Like, it's just a never-ending effect where I think now they're just like, you know what? We're going to have a hard time on 50, and we just want players just to play the game and get better and get more fluent, get more understanding of the rules. And as time goes past, you'll get more into that thing. You'll get more into a rhythm. Games will start taking shorter once the meta is more developed and people are more, you know, all adapting to all these like pieces of information. Then everything will look a lot smoother, and I think games will eventually play out faster.
Okay. You set up another segue there about sideboarding.
I love good segues.
There was no mention of sideboarding in the original rules, but obviously we have cards in the library that are screaming sideboard cards, like the Sword of Truth and the Poisoned Apple. Like, do you see that coming?
I mean, so when I was talking with George from Plurplay Games about his events, and this was a conversation we had at length about sideboards, and I said, if they're not in the rules to the game, we shouldn't use them, and because we should never insinuate like trying to change the rules by any which way. And it was nice to see the quote tournament rules come out and not include them, because while I agree, extending your deck through a sideboard makes more cards playable, which is great. You know, everyone wants to be able to play more cards. The cards that you name are perfect additions. But I could also just make the same argument that a player this weekend was playing Poison Apple on their main board. They were playing 2 of them in a top 8 of, I believe that was a Tampa Bay deck list. I can't remember. There was so many deck lists this weekend that I looked at, but someone played Poison Apple in their deck list, and it really breeds more creativity from a natural deck builder than a reliance on a sideboard. And in a lot of games, the sideboard cards all look so very the same, and like it seems like it's an extension and it's a nice to have it. But if every single sideboard was like, say, like, I don't know, 95% the same, then it kind of takes away from the whole point of it anyway. And I think it's fine. Either way, if they ever introduced it, I think it's fine. But I also think it's completely okay to not have it right now.
Interesting. Talking about cards that scream sideboard, there's that one card, that one Moana, which like banishes Taka, and you're like, sure.
Yeah.
I will say that's like, for me, that's one of my favorite arts in the game. I'll say that much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that card's, you're not gonna play that card now.
You know what? I'm just gonna throw it into one of just to.
You do you. Listen, Liam, you do you, man. You do you.
I'm a top 8 with it.
Hey, man, I hope you do. I'll talk about it. I promise. I will give it the shout out. I promise.
Chat's gonna hold me accountable. Steven pointing out in the chat that sideboarding is another time sink. You know, where we're seeing these games go to time.
Absolutely. It's just, even now, I think, you know, you're seeing 2-3 minutes in between games, which is an average time. But if we're talking about 2 or 3 minutes in between games without sideboarding, so when you start talking about sideboarding, now you might be talking about 5 minutes in between games. And with 50-minute rounds, if we go to a game 3, that's potentially 10 minutes out of the round, which means now you have 40 minutes to complete 3 games. It's not in the time frame.
Yeah. Interesting. I have a random question. It's sort of a rules related question. We can jump back to that in a second. But one of the things that I love about these first few weekends of Lorcana is we're seeing people like James Reimer, a Lorcana kind of creator, commentator on Twitter, who played in his first like major competitive event. And we see a ton of players making the switch from casual play, or maybe, you know, this is their first game ever, their card game ever, into like competitive play for the first time. And it's pretty amazing. And I want to pitch it over to Katie and Becky first as competitive. I know, Katie, you were a competitive Fab player. Becky, I don't know if you ever did much of that, but
no, never, not once.
A question for both of you then, because like my question is, you know, what if for people who are casual players, and Dan, I'd love your answer as well. You know, for people who are casual players or experiencing Lorcana as their first TCG, who maybe are eyeballing a tournament but are nervous about it, what advice would you give to them if they're thinking about jumping into competition for the first time?
I mean, I don't focus on what you're scared of, just like focus on what you're excited about. Like, because right now I would do anything to be able to drop everything and go to Miami on October 21st and like see all these cool people you interact with online and get to play your favorite card game in the world. That's how I started playing competitively. It wasn't like, oh, I want to go and beat people. It was like, oh, I like want to go hang out with my friends in Indianapolis. So yeah, I just jump in. Like, you're gonna have so much fun.
That's awesome. Dan, you have any thoughts?
Becky?
Oh, I am so scared of I'm not there yet. Like, no.
Aaron is very similar mindset. She's played a few casual events, so yeah.
So for me, and I say this with a lot of things, it's start before you're ready. It's a version of what was just said, but it's one of those that, like, if you never do it, then you'll never do it. And if you do it, then you understand it, and then you can just adapt to how your style is. Maybe you don't want to go to the highest level competitive events, but maybe you do want to go to league play, and every time you go to league play, you feel a little bit more comfortable around the people you're with. And then you realize that most of the people that are at that tournament are these people you're spending your Wednesday nights with, your third, whatever it is. And then you'll just kind of gain that, that rhythm. And I think that it's a scary, scary place. There are incredibly competitive players in every game that you play, no matter which. Some are not the nicest of people, which is always an unfortunate thing to deal with at any given setting or anything like that. But if you don't start, if you don't try, then you're waiting too long. Like, just go. Like, honestly, just go, just play, just learn, enjoy, and meet incredible people. Because even in my life, some of my best friends in life were people that I just randomly played against in a card store once upon a time. So I think that's the best thing I can say is start before you're ready. Shout out to my boy Christian Young. We're old friends. Christian Young is a perfect example. I met him 4 years ago, randomly playing Transformers, and now we talk like every single day. So, just things like that. Like, you meet these people in life that you would never have the opportunity to if you just didn't go and play the game.
That's true. I will offer it is for anybody watching, it is perfectly okay not to play competitively. Like, if that's what you're doing, totally cool. But for some people who are just kind of like on the fence about it, it's a fun thing to try, at least once. But but back to the tournament scene, and we're getting close on time, but so we've seen a lot of. We went from like having obviously no Lorcana to like on the first weekend like a 1K event, and then over the past couple of weeks we've seen tournaments everywhere, from like PPG pro style tournaments to a little more casual tournament in Tampa to just 1Ks everywhere. What do you all like? It's a very broad question, but what are you all seeing like in the tournament scene? What kind of trends? I think anything from meta trends or the type of people participating. But what's everybody's general observations of the competitive scene right off the bat?
Everything I know about the competitive scene, I know from Forbidden Mountain. So
maybe take this one down.
To be quite honest,
meta report coming tomorrow.
It's very similar. While you're here,
in all honesty, I'm not kidding. While I was watching the first part of the show here, I was working on a graph. This is just this weekend, but in just this weekend's top eights, there was three at least published top 8 events. 45% of the top 8s were consumed by Ruby Amethyst. That's a large number across 3 events. I mean, you're talking 11 of 24 decks were Ruby Amethyst, and I think one of them was actually a surefire winner, and then the other were just cuts and splits and things like that. But in all 3 of them, you're talking about in 2 of those events, half of the event was consumed by Ruby Amethyst. And then the next closest thing is Amber Steel, and then everything else is just kind of like trickling in very, very little. So, if you're planning to go to a big 1K event, do your best to plan for Ruby Amethyst. That's my biggest takeaway to help anyone out, is that deck absolutely will show up. It will be there. It'll probably be the most played deck in any given event for the next couple months, in all honesty.
Interesting. Is it the best deck, or is it the first deck that people saw perform well, and so you just see a lot of them and it's the first one people have tested?
Consistency is really hard to beat in a game. And I think a real common trait that you're seeing is a lot of players that weren't necessarily even Lorcana players, they're just good competitive card players, are picking up this deck because it is like a solid, compilation of cards that good competitive players that are just, instinct, that have that instinct. It's a perfect deck for them to play and succeed with. Whether or not it's the best is a complete debate and argument, but it's absolutely the most consistent. And I think for me, the biggest thing I tell everyone is that, sometimes you're playing to win an event, but most times you're playing to top 8 an event. And I think that that's the kind of deck that if you're a really competent player, if you're, you feel good about the game and you just want to like give yourself a chance, then I think that it's really hard to not just pick up Ruby Amethyst.
This might be a really ignorant question, but like, is it an expensive deck to make, or is it pretty accessible?
It's definitely on the top end, but it's that same reason. I mean, when you just look at demand, half the decks this weekend were this deck. So that means people going to their next events, they're buying these cards, and there's a lot of legendaries in these decks, which also is expensive. So like Ursula at one point was like an $8 card, and now she's like a $15 to $20 card. Elsa is a swinger, but she started around 35 and she was up to like 65 at some point. After this weekend, after these reports, she might be on the rise again. So, it's definitely one of the more expensive decks, but it's also because the top end, rarities of those decks are just, they're legendaries and secret rares and things like that. So it helps that the Aladdin is a starter deck card, because if that card wasn't a starter deck card, it would be even more expensive.
That's a good point. It's a really good point. And it highlights how good the starter decks are and how much value there is there. Plenty of playables.
Yeah, no, I mean, they're even the commons and uncommons in those decks, they're, aside from the Emerald one that got shafted and didn't get Flynn's or Cheshire Cats.
Yeah.
Come on,
Mad Hatter.
Come on. Yeah, no, they got Mad Hatter, which is good, but we could have used some Cheshire Cats and Flynn's. That's all I'm saying.
That's fair. Interesting. No, it's a really good question, Becky, because I do think that's some of the frustration that you see now among people trying to break into the game, even playing casual at their shops, is, the best deck that that people consistently see is expensive.
Yeah, but then it's not that there isn't budget decks that are being successful.
That is
Recently, one of the decks that came out was the Amethyst Emerald deck, which is honestly under a $200 deck. Which I know we can have a debate of whether that's not expensive or not. But if the average, a couple weeks ago, I did the average cost of the PPG event, and the average cost of the top 8 PPG was $453, and that Emerald Amethyst deck came in at $173. So you're talking hundreds of dollars below the average. So you have to label that as a budget deck, because if everything is in the 400s and this is below 2, then that's just the budget for our game currently. So like anytime you can go, I can buy a deck for like $150 and it's competitive, and like it had more success this weekend. I think it was 2 of them across three events. So I think that's it's a good sign that those decks are successful. But it is a question mark of whether or not that, yes, they can be successful, they can make top 8s, but can they actually like pull together a full win is kind of, I think, where we need to figure out now.
Didn't we see a modified Amber Amethyst in the top 8 in the tournament that you commentated on?
It wasn't top 8, but it won matches, and it took a game from an Amber Amethyst. I'm sorry, a Ruby Amethyst deck. It was a modified Amber Amethyst starter. Somebody had switched out the healing package, thrown in some Maximuses, a Stitch or 2, some Lanterns, and it performed very well.
Nice.
Yeah. Anyway, just another point to the value of the starters.
There's plenty of good cards in there.
Yeah, that is true. Friends from the other side will be good forever. Anyway, Dan,
I know why you did that, Liam. It's okay.
I love it. I'm just gonna leave that there. Dan, thanks so much for joining us. We love having you on. It seems like we have you on every week because you're such a valuable source of information. Go follow Forbidden Mountain, everybody. They also have a card shop, so if you're looking for singles,
it's true.
Forbidden Mountain. Dan, thanks so much.
Thank you guys for having me. Very nice to meet you. Live Life Lorcana. Hope you guys. I'm sad to hear that you're not in Miami, but maybe you change your mind and show
There's
up.
still time.
There's plenty of time.
There's still time.
See you guys.
Bye.
I always at the start of an hour, I'm always like, man, this shit, we have so much time, and at the end, I'm like, that went by fast.
Yeah.
And we're even over time. Any thanks so much for me. Any closing thoughts from the show? We talked about a lot.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was just awesome.
It was great. Thank you so much for having
thank
us.
you.
It was so much fun. I loved it.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, we are very excited to have you on. Like, I say to a lot of people, we're fans, but we're huge fans of your show. You all are doing something that I think no other, content creation team is. It's a family podcast. You all are sisters. You have both the Disney side and the competitive TCG side. You bring it together, and we want everybody to listen to your podcast. So,
thank you so much. That means a lot.
Thanks for being here. Before I go, I'm just going to throw up one more time. If you're watching and you haven't subscribed to Live Laugh Lorcana or followed Becky, Katie, and I'll let you all, I'll ask you all your Twitter handles in a second on Twitter, or the artist formerly known as Twitter, please go do that. You won't be sorry. But Katie, Becky, how can people follow you all?
Yeah, you can follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Also social media.
Yeah, we're on Twitter and Instagram. We're in Live Laugh Lorcana. I think on Twitter it's shortened because of the character limit. But yeah, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. That's the best way to find us, honestly.
And we also have a fun little Discord if you want to ever hang out with us.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing I'm doing after the show. I'm heading into the Discord. But no, thank you all so much for being here. Hope everybody in the chat, thanks for watching, and we'll see you all next week.
Yeah.
So,
Bye, everybody.
And for our normal catchphrase, we do sign off catchphrase because it's the best we got.